Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Kendall from Soonest Tech here, and first and foremost, I want to apologize, guys, for the lack of videos recently. It's spring break for me right now, so I am truly taking in the scenery and enjoying not having any homework in school, so that's why we have a lack of videos recently. But guys, I wanted to first and foremost talk to you guys about Ryzen 5. There's been a whole lot of news in the press recently about Ryzen 5 and kind of how it's going to mix up the market and what it's been about. But I've noticed really people haven't talked as much about Ryzen 5 as they did about Ryzen 7, and to me that's kind of odd. Now, I really want to talk about this because I think Ryzen 5 is really going to be AMD's sweet spot. We talked about the success of Ryzen 7 and how it really blew up the market and how everybody's been going nuts over it. I mean, just this article from Forbes, for example, talks about how the AMD Ryzen bandwagon has been raging at a blistering pace for weeks, and now the further over Ryzen 7 Trio releases a bunch of Ryzen 5 CPUs. So I think this really goes to show, guys, that people have been really riding the Ryzen 7 bandwagon, and duly so. Ryzen 7 really showed some really great performance, and I think that's amazing. But guys, let's talk about Ryzen 5 for a minute. Now, AMD released some details about Ryzen 5. They haven't released everything, but we've known for a while now the specs. We've known for a while now, as this article from AMD Tech shows, some of the specs of the Ryzen 5 CPUs, and here's what they look like compared to the Ryzen 7 CPUs. Now, we've got 4 different SKUs. We've got the 1600X, the 1600, the 1500X, and the 1400X. Now, guys, 2 of these CPUs are going to be 6 cores, 12 threads. This is similar to the FX 6300 that I remember back from when I built my first PC, which was a 6300 FX build. And then we've also got the 1500X and the 1400 are both going to be, they're going to be quad cores inherently, and they're going to have 8 threads. So guys, if we look at the price point, that's really the important thing that we're going to look at here, because we should, theoretically, these Ryzen 5 CPUs should run with similar IPC or instructions per clock as Ryzen 7. So we know that it's going to be good. Maybe not quite as high up there as, for example, Intel Skylake, but it's going to be really good, especially compared to the Bulldozer core from the FX CPUs. It's going to be monumentally better than that. That being said, guys, it looks like the Ryzen 5 1600X, as you can see from this article, is going to run about $250. Now, I think this is going to be at the high end of your average gamer or average PC builder is going to maybe be looking at processors in this price range, but I think this is going to be the high end of that. Now, guys, your content creators and your really hardcore people are going to be buying Ryzen 7. I think Ryzen 7 is really up there for more of your YouTubers, your streamers, your people that are not going to be buying budget in PCs. I mean, heck, when I built my first PC, and even now, I mean, I can't afford Ryzen 7. So it's one of those things where it's like maybe your top 5-10% buy Ryzen 7, and then all your normal average people are probably going to be buying Ryzen 5. I mean, for example, I bought the i5 6600K, and that was at the top of my price range, and that's only an i5. So I think that really people kind of where I'm sitting at are going to be wanting Ryzen 5. So we look at this $250 price point. That's a pretty good price point for a 12-thread CPU, and Intel can't match anything even remotely close in that price range with that many threads. Now we look at the turbo, or the base and the turbo. It runs at 3.6 gigahertz with a turbo of 4.0, and I believe that's on a single core. That's not across all cores. Still though, guys, if we see any kind of the similar performance multi-threaded that we get with Ryzen 7 and Ryzen 5, granted it's got 4 less threads, and I understand that, but guys, this is going to be a monster. I mean, if you can get 12 cores for $250, or even the 1600 for $220, that's crazy. That's going to be huge for content creators and gamers alike, especially as more games start utilizing more and more threads. Now, guys, you've seen these details. We've known these things for a while, so I don't think any of this is going to be a surprise to you. However, I do suggest you guys go check out this article from AMD Tech. This kind of lays out everything they know about Ryzen 5 and what they expect from Ryzen 5. It also goes in depth about the different Wraith coolers that AMD is going to be packaging with Ryzen 5. Which, if you guys haven't seen this yet, go check out Bitwit's channel and check out his video over the Spire coolers and how well they perform, because it's actually really impressive how well these AMD stock coolers perform, even when being overclocked, which is pretty cool. Especially for people that don't necessarily want to spend the money for example, on a liquid cooler or on an aftermarket air cooler. This could be a really good option for those kind of people. But I want to point out an article, guys, that came out from TechSpot. And guys, this article, it's all very theoretical. No one knows exactly how Ryzen 5 is going to perform. However, if you read more in depth in this article, and by the way, go check it out. I'm going to post this in the comments, or post this in the video description. But they disabled 4 cores from the Ryzen 7 CPUs to try to match the performance of Ryzen 5. Now, guys, here are some of the results they came up with when they tested it with video games. They came up with 3 different SKUs of testing. They tested one with the 1080 Ti, they tested the other one with the 1070, and then the other one with the 1060. So we kind of got different price points here. We've got your hardcore extreme gamers and content creators with the 1080 Ti. We've got your average gamers with the 1070, and then even a little bit more budget at the 1060. Now I think this really helps kind of put into perspective the CPUs and the price points, guys. Because as you can see with the very first game right out of the gate, they started out with Far Cry Primal. Now Far Cry Primal, as they go in depth in the article about, is really difficult for Ryzen to run. I don't really know why. It's just very poorly optimized for AMD, I suppose. But it's really, really hard to run this on the CPU, on Ryzen specifically. So as you guys can see, the 7600 or 7700K and the 7600K both beat out Ryzen 7 and both of the theoretical Ryzen 5s by a significant margin. And this is just because this game is very poorly optimized for AMD. However, if you guys scroll down even into the 1060, when you get down to the 1060, there's very less of a gap. I mean, you guys look at the i7 7700K compared to Ryzen 7 1800X, and there's only about a 2 FPS difference there, and that's with very poor optimization on the Ryzen side. So, as you guys can see from here, if you're running a lower end graphics card, especially with a game like, not even a lower end graphics card, because I wouldn't consider the 1060 a low end graphics card, but maybe more of a budget oriented card, you're really not going to see a performance hit with Ryzen 7 on games that are probably the most poorly optimized for it. So guys, if we keep scrolling through and you go to page on page, they do Mafia 3, they do a bunch of different tests with different video games. They do For Honor, all these with the Ti, again the 1070 and the 1060. Now guys, the most interesting thing to note about this, and I think most important, is really if you are more in the budget, if you're in the budget for a Ryzen 5 CPU, and let's say you have an Intel CPU, maybe a Skylake or Kaby Lake processor, you're really not going to see a performance difference with any of the Ryzen CPUs when it comes to gaming. Guys, realistically, if you're using a budget-oriented card for, say, like I'm using the AMD RX 480, an XFX RX 480, 8GB, which is pretty much on par with the 1060. Now, you guys can get in arguments in the comments about the 1060 versus the RX 480, however much you want in the comments, but guys, I'm gonna let you know they're very similar cards. That being said, guys, if I was per se and I'm running a 6600K, let's say I switch out my 6600K for a Ryzen 7, but I'm still running that RX 480, I am not going to see a performance difference. And this article from TechSpot really goes to show why that is, because if you guys look between, and obviously the i5 result or the Ryzen 5 results, I realize are just theoretical, but if you look at Ryzen 7, which are real results, compared to the 7700K, and this is across all games, this trend keeps on. If you look at the 1080 Ti, dead heat between the Ryzen 7 and the i7 7700K at 176 FPS for For Honor at 1080p. And guys, if you scroll down to the 1060, the performance difference is exactly the same. If you look at the i7 compared to the Ryzen 7 CPU, it's almost identical. And guys, you'll see this is most prevalent on the games that are very poorly optimized for AMD, because this is where you hit that graphics card bottleneck. So if you guys, if I go back to the very first page of this article, where they talked about it being with, let's see, right here, where they talked about the results with, let's see, Far Cry Primal. Now, if we look at the 1080 Ti, the 7700K is significantly further ahead of Ryzen 7. And then we scroll down to the 1060, and dead heat between the i7 and the Ryzen 7 CPU. So really, if you're in this more budget-oriented class, like I am, that is not a slam to anybody, because I am very much in that class too. Very few people are going to want to get the Ryzen 7 or a 1080 Ti for that matter. But if you guys are in this class and you guys have a fairly recent Intel CPU, there's no point in upgrading to Ryzen 5 or Ryzen 7. Now, if you're a content creator, you're going to see a vast difference with the amount of cores in Ryzen 7 and even Ryzen 5. But if you're just a gamer, guys, or if you're anybody on a budget, there's really no need to upgrade to Ryzen right now unless you're building a new PC. If you're building a new PC or you're upgrading from a significantly older Intel CPU, you're definitely going to benefit from this. But as this chart shows, and as it shows throughout the rest of this article, where they benchmark different games with Ryzen 7 and then what they think Ryzen 5 is going to perform like, there's no reason to upgrade, guys, if you're at Skylake or Kaby Lake right now, or even before that, maybe even Haswell and Broadwell. So guys, I think what we've learned from this is Ryzen 5 is going to be the new best budget CPU out there from what I can tell, and we don't have results yet, so this is all speculation, guys. This is all just my own thoughts, my own opinions, but it looks like Ryzen 5 is going to be a killer. If we look again at the specs on AnandTech, if we look at the Ryzen 5 1600 per se, the 1600 runs at $220. Now that's a very affordable cost, guys. That's with 6 cores and 12 threads. And then if you look below that, and this is only at a 65 watt TDP, so that's another thing to keep in mind. And then if you look below that, the Ryzen, say 1500X, that's under $200. Now at that point, you're getting a quad core hyper threaded, which is not what, that's an Intel term, but let's say it's Ryzen 5 1500X, it's got 4 cores and 8 threads, guys. That's more than my i5 6600K, which sure is probably going to have a better IPC, but that amount of threads is going to make a huge difference, especially in games like Battlefield 1 that are a lot more optimized for more and more threads, and they can take use of those threads. And guys, as we see Ryzen continue forward with new architecture improvements on staying with the Ryzen CPUs, but as they improve the architecture as we get years and years into the mix, because we'll have Ryzen around for at least 4 years, that IPC is going to get even better. If we look at Skylake now, Ryzen could easily be past this whenever they continue to upgrade the architecture. Now guys, if we scroll down a little bit, they start to compare the 6600K, for example, or the 1600X with the 7600K, and then they also compare the 1500X with the i5 7500. And guys, if you look at the price differences here, there's no competition. I mean, you look at the quad core with 8 thread CPU, the Ryzen 5, running at almost the same clock speed as the Intel CPU, with a massively bigger level 3 cache, the same 65 watt TDP, and then one's at 189 and one's at 182. You're getting 4 more threads for $7 more. So I don't think you can really argue with these results. The Ryzen 5 CPU is going to be the new champion when it comes to budget CPUs, whether it be for gamers or for content creators. I can't stress that enough, guys. If we look at the 1600X versus the 7600K, which is probably the higher end, it's pretty much what I'm running, but just the KB Lake version, we're looking at another $7 difference, $242 versus $249, at least at the time of this article. We're looking at 6 cores, 12 threads versus 4 cores, 4 threads. So guys, I'm not going to keep ranting on this, but it looks like Ryzen 5 is definitely going to be a winner. We've known this for a while, but just to put into perspective when it comes to gaming, by looking at this article from TechSpot, which again I'll link in the description so you guys can go check it out because they really go in depth on some more of these gaming benchmarks. It looks like Ryzen 5 is going to be a winner. So guys, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about this video. Let me know what you think about my little rant about Ryzen 5 and just kind of what I've been seeing in the news lately, whether it be on Twitter or on different tech article websites. Even Forbes did an article about it. So, and guys, as always, please subscribe. Follow me on Twitter at SmoothestTech. And again, let me know what you think about this video and continue to let me know what you guys want next when it comes to this channel. I'm really active listening to you guys, whether it be reaching out to me on Twitter, on YouTube, wherever it be at, guys. And also, please take a look at my other Ryzen videos. Some of them are a little old now. They're a little outdated simply because Ryzen 7's been launched and a lot of my videos were pre-launched. But also take a look at my Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon Wildlands review. That was a video I worked pretty hard on recently. I think you guys will enjoy it. So thank you guys for watching. Peace.